Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I'm Jassim Azzawi. The criminal investigation by American authorities of the alleged role of senior military officers in the possible misuse of $125 billion allocated for the reconstruction of Iraq could turn out to be the biggest case of fraud in U.S. history. Given the enormous scale of the looted money and seniority of officers involved, cynics wonder whether the Pentagon has the courage to lock these officers behind bars, or will it go only after junior officers, as it did in the Abu Ghraib scandal. The one bewildering question on the minds of many Iraq experts is, how did $125 billion evaporate so fast and show so little for it under the watchful eyes of top military commanders?
The US attack on Iraq and years of sectarian war have left Baghdad and other major cities in ruins. Iraqis are in dire need of basic necessities like clean water and electricity. According to US official estimates, some $125 billion have been set aside for reconstruction work of Iraq. But to date, very little have trickled down to the population. Reports of fraud have recently surfaced, implicating American military officials of misuse of funds intended for US-directed efforts to reconstruction projects in Iraq. The exact sum missing may never be clear, but a report by the US Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction, SIGIR, suggests it may exceed $50 billion. In October 2007, the US Congress passed a resolution to stop the abuse of classifying state documents to hide the truth about corruption in Iraq. Congressman Harry Waxman accused former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice of preventing Congress access to State Department documents relating to the issue.
The numbers are so large that it doesn't seem possible that they're true. Who in their right mind would send 360 tons of cash into a war zone? But that's exactly what our government did.
While the ongoing investigations are being pursued in the US, the real victims of the fraud are ordinary Iraqis who are left struggling with the ruins of war, rebuilding their future and that of their children.
To discuss this alleged enormous Ponzi scheme, I'm delighted to welcome from London Patrick Coburn, a reporter with the British Independent newspaper, who titled his article about this case as Fraud Bigger Than Madoff. And from Baghdad, Mahdi Al-Hafiz, a former planning minister and a current member of parliament. But before we start our discussion, I have to state that I was both disappointed and not surprised at all to receive negative refusals from the Pentagon, U.S. Department of State, U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, and the multinational force in Iraq. When we asked these four entities for someone to be on the show, they all declined our request for scheduling reasons. Patrick, let me start with you. I'm the first to recognize that American officials, they normally don't comment on ongoing criminal investigation. But given the enormity of the subject under discussion, $125 billion involved, as well as corruption perhaps will go all the way up higher the chain, are you surprised that no one is willing to appear and talk about it?
No, not at all. This is extraordinarily embarrassing for the U.S. I mean, this is an extraordinary sum of money to disappear or be wasted, and one which had a devastating effect on the American reputation in Iraq. You know, I've been amazed over the last few years of hearing about these great sums being spent, and then I'd climb onto the roof of my hotel in the Jadriya district of Baghdad and look around across the skyline of Baghdad, and there isn't a single crane to be seen, except until recently those building the new American embassy. So one always thought, what has happened to this money? And it disappeared. I mean, as I said in my article, one very senior American oil man said to me, the real looting of Baghdad was what the American companies did after 2003, not people from Sadr City stealing tables and chairs. And I think that's true.
Mahdi Al-Hafiz, you were a planning minister at a certain period between 2003 and 2008. Did you get an inclination that money is being wasted, that this enormous sum being spent on projects and there is nothing to show for it?
Yes, of course, there has been a lot of talk about that, and I think that now the time is quite high to reveal all the secrets of that deals. In my opinion, that there should be some sort of investigation, and what happened during Bush administration should be now come to the public, as it is one of the serious problems which took place at that time.
Patrick, the notion among Iraq experts, among Iraqis as well as Americans, this was well known, this was quite flagrantly done, and yet nobody paid attention to it at the time. In your opinion, why is that?
Attention was paid to it, but I don't think at the time people realized that all the money was disappearing. You know, it took a bit of time to work this out. There was no publicity about this. They kept on saying they were building things. It took a certain amount of time to see that they weren't there. I mean, really only took me about a year to take this on board, what was really happening. There were famous scandals, such as the disappearance of the whole military procurement budget, $1.3 billion in 2004-2005, when all that was the money went and all that came back the other direction was scraps of metal, was 28-year-old obsolete Soviet helicopters that were already past their sell-by date, and vehicles, if you can believe it, from Pakistan that the Pakistani army said could no longer be used. So this was famous. Now, a lot of this was blamed on Iraqis at the time, but I always thought, sitting in Baghdad, that anything done by the Defense Ministry, which was largely run by Americans, almost entirely run by Americans at that moment, could not have been done without their knowledge. So either they were in it up to their necks, or they were highly negligent.
Mahdi al-Hafiz, Patrick says without the Americans this would not have happened. The Iraqis were incapable, and perhaps they were not in command of most of this money. From what you know, is it possible that there was a collaboration between corrupt Iraqi officials as well as corrupt U.S. military contracting officers, and hence that money disappeared?
Yes, actually, I think there has been some collaboration with a number of Iraqi officials, either in the Defense Ministry or also in other security offices. This has to be coming to public in a very transparent way. I believe that Iraq during that period has suffered a lot from this in-secret things, which in my opinion create a lot of problems about the CPA, and also after that about the government, which came immediately after that. In my opinion, that the question is not a matter of American, but also it is a sort of collaboration between the Americans and the Iraqis official.
Patrick, we know exactly what happened in the Abu Ghraib scandal. Only junior officers are languishing behind bars. The torture that was carried out in Abu Ghraib did not go all the way to the big brass. Why do you think this time we think big brass will go behind bars?
Well, I think that, first of all, that this must have gone right to the top. And
how far?
Certainly, I mean, you said at the beginning, I think right to the very top.
Being the White House?
Bush himself. Yeah, just below, probably not Bush himself, but just below that level.
Cheney and Rumsfeld.
Certain names start cropping up. No, just, people will want to ask questions of those who were involved in the U.S. Defense Department, such as Wolfowitz, the neocons in general. Many things which happened, I think, could not have happened without them agreeing to it. You said at the beginning you had difficulty having American officials come on and talk about this, but after I'd written this article, I got an email privately from one senior American official saying, absolutely, this is worse than Madoff, and it goes right to the top. And then